Welcome to Focus on B, the video series where I would typically spend about 20 or so minutes playing and talking about a game, but this time it's only going to be 10 minutes, and why is that? Well, simple, because this is a game that, once again, as you can probably tell by the... I mean, at this point, it's like an art style, right? It's not really my own art style, but yeah, I made this game as well. I call it, get this, I've named it Frogget-It. Okay, let me explain. So basically, it's like, you can tell it's tile-based, so it's like Frogger. And so it's like Frogget-It, like forget it, because it's not actually, it's not like Frogger at all. And that, I'm really freaking proud of what I just did there, where when you take a hit, the character kind of blinks for a bit. You know what? That's enough showing the actual game. You guys should go play it. It's on itch. Instead, I'm just going to show you what I've done here with the actual game. So, this is what the average level... There's only 4 levels in this game because, holy shit, making these levels is such a pain in the ass because of the way I do the enemies. But anyway, this is what it looks like from the top. It's obviously a top-down game. And fun fact, this whole thing right here, which is a parallax layer, as in if I go over here, as you can see, the parallax, I can make it go away. It wasn't supposed to be that way initially. I just made a water sprite for the level to put some water down. But then I realized it looks really freaking cool when you know, have it scroll like that. So I thought, let's make that the theme for the level. And I had already made these tiles right here, which sink into the water. So I thought, yes, that is perfect. These right here, you can't walk through. You can't walk through these either. And here's how I did the enemies. Let's see if I can open up my enemies place script. There you go. Here's how I handled the enemies. So basically, they spawn in and they have a timer connected to them. In fact, the timer is this one right here. And that timer basically says when I run out of time right here, there you go, wait time, when that goes down to 0, I want you to trigger the move function that I have written. And what that move function is, first it creates a variable that is a tween, and that tween starts to tween itself, like its own property, right? It takes the enemy itself, the e-follow in this case, the follow node, as it's called, that follows whatever path that I've assigned it, and it basically just goes, okay, progress ratio. The reason why I'm using progress ratio instead of just progress is because it allows you to basically make it any shape or any size. You can make the path any size at all, and it will sort of figure out, for example, if you go to 0.5, it'll always be right at the edge, right at the end of when it's about to go back, right? So for example here, look, if I click on this, let me click on the, follow. And if I move the progress itself, it'll move by pixels. Problem is, this can mean anything. If I were to make this longer, this would no longer correspond to this. It would be the same position on the screen physically, but it would no longer be relative to the path. Whereas this, if I set this to 0.5, it's always going to be right there. No matter how long I make it, if that makes sense. It's always going to be at the end of the line, right? And 1 will be all the way to the other side. That's why it's much better to use progress ratio. Let's go back to the script. So that tells it to what value to tween it, and then how long should it take. So it takes half a second, and then a full second. It kind of sits there to get to the final value, and then it goes back. And then basically I actually just have to... I was initially planning on flipping it. I had a separate timer that flipped the node, but that made it a little bit clunky, and I don't know why I actually got rid of it, considering that theoretically it should actually work just fine, considering that the amount of time is the same between them, but whatever. Basically I scrapped that idea, so they just kind of move back and forth. And this right here is a health pickup. This was supposed to be a weapon. Initially, I was planning on making it so that there was like a hidden weapon in every stage where you could pick it up and start killing all the enemies. But I thought that was kind of dumb. Like, I'm not sure why. I just really felt that it was cliched. So I just went, fuck it. I'm just going to have a health pickup. You initially started out with only 3 health points, but I realized that was way too punishing because you go all the way back to the start of the level. So... you know, if you die. So instead I was like, okay, let's just have a health pickup. Let's give you tons of health. Make the game not too difficult, but it can still be hard because there's no invincibility frames, right? So you gotta fucking move. You can't just take a hit and then go, oh, I'm invincible now. You still have to play the game proper. It's just not as punishing as it would have been. And that's pretty much it for the first level. There's really not that much to discuss in terms of the way I designed this. The second level that I'm going to show off, and I'm not going to show any of these two right here. You got to play the game yourself. This is a cave level, which I'm really freaking happy with the music on this one. Like, incredibly so. I think it sounds fucking awesome. For this game's soundtrack, I decided to go for a more actually 8-bit sound. Not the typical sound that I have where I have synthesizers and stuff, but it's still very modern with like a billion tracks and all these textures and layers and sounds. Here, I was like, no, let's strip it down. Let's actually try and make it like 8-bit music. So all I have is left, right, square, and a triangle in the middle. And obviously the noise for the drums. And that's it. That's the whole... that's how my DAW would look, you know? Here we have all these lava tiles, which you can't go through, but I also added like an extra layer of like coal or something. Basically, all of these textures here, I think this is the only instance in the game where I didn't actually, technically I didn't make the textures myself. I ripped them from Google Images, but like, you probably won't be able to tell because it's such a low resolution. What I've done is I took a very high resolution image and took a very tiny little chunk of it, right? And then to get all these effects, I basically upped the contrast to a ridiculous amount to make all the colors peak, and then I just sampled. I used the color region tool in Photoshop, and I basically sampled all of those particular points, and I took them out, and I added the colors and gradients and stuff to them separately. So you have all these like, they look like gems and shit. These are the enemies, by the way. You can go through them when they're not active, and you obviously take damage if you hit, like, look. Ow, I took damage, and it plays a little sound effect. And yes, I did reuse the sound effect that I made for my car game for brake limit. I just reused that sound to, you know, to use as a damage sound here, because honestly, like, who's gonna really notice? This is a really cool little set piece I came up with, where it's like you're on a bridge over lava. I thought that was really cool. Although this lava right here is actually a separate layer. Let's actually showcase that. So basically, most of this is on the same layer, because it doesn't really have, there's no reason for it not to be. But here, I realized that I wanted to have an alternative tile that's, like, darker. But I also... Actually, is it on the same one? What is it? Where's my shit? These are my scenes. Ah, yeah, there we go, scenes. These are my, obviously, files. Let's see, cave terrain, bridge. No. The bridge is the only thing that's separate. This right here is on its own layer. I mean, it's on its own node. That's the exact same, right? So, you know, over here we have like all the regular ones, including the bridge, even though I made that one separate, because I wanted to have something else underneath that being, as you can see, because the thing is with Godot, and maybe in other engines too, this whole thing here works backwards. Whatever is lower appears on top. So think of it as like more of a forward, like front to back sort of system, where this is the front, this is the back. That's kind of how I think of it. So it's like farther away or closer to the viewer. And that's pretty much the whole level, actually. The levels are very short, but I feel like the challenge makes up for it, because if, you know, I mean, I could make the game harder, really. If I wanted to make the game even harder, I could just go into my character script, which I made a separate one for every level so I can have it teleport you to different levels when you're done. As you can see here, it sends you to the floating island stage, but I could genuinely just give the player very little HP. I could just go like, no, fuck it. You only get free hit points, you know? Which... that would be a little bit harsh, don't you think? I'm not going to do that, obviously. Anyway, this is how I made the controller. See, the reason why the character moves in kind of a janky way is actually because of the way that it basically forces the position to be updated by a particular amount. Every single tile in this game I've chosen to make it, because I was thinking of having it be either 32 or 16, but 16 looked too small, and 32 was too big, and you couldn't see that much. So I thought, okay, compromise. So I came up with 24. So basically each one of these is 8 pixels, each one of these squares. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, 8, 16, 24. 8, 16, 24. So I just went like this. Okay, free by free. So the character updates by that many pixels, essentially, in any given direction. And funnily enough, this takes a little bit more effort to program than standard left and right movement like you would have in a game. I was actually initially planning on having the enemies be tile-based as well, but then that made avoiding them really difficult because it was kind of hard to predict exactly how they're going to move. So I decided to just make them smooth, you know. and it was more frustrating to program as well. So I thought, fuck it, might as well make it easier for myself and make it easier for the players to have a good time. So anyway, that's pretty much going to do it for this game. For Frogget-It, Frogget-It. Yeah, there you go, Frogget-It. That's how I'm calling the game. And don't tell anybody the lava doesn't actually extend past the screen because the camera doesn't scroll. Let me actually show you how I did that. Here, look. Tile guy camera, global position, it's constantly forced. Every single frame, it gets forced in the middle so that it never scrolls left or right. That's not a thing in Godot as like a function, as like a separate option. You have to program that, I think. But it works though, so now the camera only scrolls up and down. And that was basically that was the concept behind the game, and that's why the logo looks the way it does, because the idea behind the logo was like, it's a tile-based game, so there's a little square taken out of the arrow because it's pointing up because you're constantly scrolling up. That's the idea for the game. So yeah, so I guess hopefully you guys will have a fun couple minutes with this game. It's not a huge game or anything. It's only like 4 levels, but they're a little bit tricky. I'm really happy with the floating island one. I'm not going to show it right now. And as you would expect, this one right here, tile-based beach. That was actually the first level I made, but it ended up being the hardest, so go figure, I put it at the end. So anyway, this has been Focus on B, the video series where I would typically spend about 20 or so minutes playing and talking about a game, in this case just 10 minutes, and this has been my own game, Frogget-It 2025 PC.